All right, so we're live on LinkedIn Learning, YouTube, Twitch. There is a special guest today, John, who is the head of the AI Product Innovation Master's Program at Duke. And you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Noah. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is John Reifschneider. I'm the director of the Master's of Engineering program in AI for Product Innovation at Duke University. So I run our AI master's program and teach a few of the courses in it and do a few other things as well that we'll talk about a little today.
Cool. And maybe like you can say a little bit about your interest in like building AI products and how that got you to where you're at now.
Yeah, happy to. So a little bit about my background. I'm somewhat unusual in the academic world in that I didn't spend my career in academia. I actually spent the vast majority of my career in industry, building software as a service products, some of which use AI and machine learning and others that didn't. And I did a number of different things, different roles working with data and analytics, but my most recent role prior to joining the faculty here at Duke was that I ran a business that provided weather forecasting and predictive analytics tools for a variety of types of enterprise customers. So most of the major airlines around the world were customers of ours. About 80% of the major electric utilities in the country, a lot of the state transportation agencies, some major professional sports teams, et cetera. And so this was a business actually that had been around since the early 1980s, and really had been a leader in providing weather prediction and built up a great roster of different customers that were extremely loyal to the company. But when I took over running the business, which now is probably about 8 years ago or so, it was sort of a stagnant business, not really a growing business. Software as a service business provided services online as well as a mobile app. But what had happened in the weather industry is that we've had continued innovation in the quality of weather forecasts across the board have gotten better and better. And so, and prices have gotten cheaper and cheaper. And so when you think about the idea of providing weather forecasts to make money, it sort of seems odd because you probably have 4 different free weather apps on your phone, and so we're very fortunate to have these low cost or even free yet fairly high quality weather forecasting products available to us. But when you think about a major electric utility or a major airline, weather is something that has a major impact on their operations. It's in fact, understanding what's going to happen with the weather is critical to their operations. Knowing whether it's safe to fly planes or not. Is it safe for this plane to take off? What route should this plane fly to ensure safety, to try to avoid any potential turbulence in the air, any severe storms? You think about an electric utility, trying to understand whether a major snowstorm or maybe a major tropical storm is going to impact their territory and cause power outages, and if so, where and how many, and how bad is the restoration effort going to be? These are organizations that care a lot about having a very, very high quality of weather prediction, and so they are willing to pay money to get something that's better than what you and I get for free or for a couple bucks on our phone. And so that was our business model. Is we had some technology that provided a superior weather forecast that used some sort of an intelligent ensembling technique to be able to provide a superior weather forecast, and that had worked really well over a number of years. But the market for our services wasn't really growing, and so when I took over the business, we went out and spent a lot of time understanding how our customers were actually using the forecast we were providing. And it turned out what we kind of consistently heard from them is that they didn't really care that much about the weather forecast itself. What they cared about was what's the impact going to be for my operations. So, we were telling them how much it's going to rain or what the wind speed's going to be, et cetera. They would then have to take that and translate that into, okay, so does that mean that this plane can take off or not? And does that mean there's going to be power outages or not? And so we realized that there was an opportunity to kind of go the next step, and rather than just provide them, forecasts of different weather parameters, that we could actually try to predict the impact of the weather on their operations. And so that's what we did, and we started building these tools. And this was about 6 or 8 years ago. It's still somewhat early days for using machine learning, at least deploying anything that use machine learning. And so we started building products that use machine learning on the weather data we had, as well as data coming from our customers, things like routes that they were planning to fly. In the case of the electric utilities, we use things like historical power outage data that they had, we satellite data, et cetera. And we started building tools that could actually predict the impact of weather on their operations. And had a lot of success in doing that, and built a number of tools that are used today by a lot of the major airlines, transportation agencies, utilities, et cetera. And that experience running that business is what really made me appreciate the power of the technologies of AI and machine learning, and how they can be used in a lot of different areas to add value, to create value for customers. And one of the things I found during that experience is that up until sort of really the last few years, the idea of doing anything with machine learning and AI has really been kind of limited to a fairly small subset of the population. Typically your PhD working in a research lab somewhere, building models. Often those models aren't getting deployed anywhere. But we've had such great advances in open source technology in recent years that it's really made the tools to do these things accessible to a wide variety of people. And what I found through my work experience, and continue to find through my work that I do at Duke and teaching, is that some of the most interesting and most valuable applications of these technologies are really coming from people that have a certain expertise in a particular field or domain, and then are equipped with the skills in machine learning and AI to go build products that solve problems for people in that domain. So in my case, most of my team came from a weather and meteorology background, and so we had meteorologists who could program and could build things with machine learning. In other areas, when I look at my students, we have clinicians, doctors, we have radiologists in the program who are learning how to use machine learning and AI to go build really fascinating things in the healthcare space, for example. And we have scientists, likewise, who are passionate about a specific area and want to get the tools and the latest technologies to go build interesting things in those areas. So this has continued to kind of reinforce my belief that these are technologies which really can be leveraged by a lot of people across a wide variety of fields to build some really interesting and useful things.
Yeah, that's a good summary of your background and some of the things you've been working on, and it fits with some of the research I've done recently as well, and also my own work experience. So 2013 or so, I was working for a social media sports company, so it was like all sports, and similar kind of thing where we had domain experts who, athlete handlers, and people that really knew that space. And still around that same time, like 2013, maybe kind of similar area, there's just not much documentation about putting models into production. And what we discovered as well was that once we started to get stuff working, and we were able to predict like how much ROI an athlete could bring to a platform. And now that's actually a big deal. Like influencer marketing is like a huge industry.
Wow.
But that's basically how we generated all our growth. We discovered that the brands and the athletes wanted products that exactly what you said, which is that demonstrated ROI. And it seems like now 2022 and beyond, that now that's the focus of MLOps is, in a sense, like, sure, there's technical things like feature stores, which, maybe you need it, maybe you don't. But the reality is, it seems like it's the ROI. That's what people are really trying to harness is. And so how do you get ROI? It sounds like and I agree with you that it's the domain expert and like the high level tools.
Yeah, exactly. I think that what's been going on with MLOps is further accelerated this trend towards a focus on getting things into production, not just building nice prototypes and things that work in the research lab, but things that are actually useful in production to users. But one of the important skills, you bring up a good point. One of the main skills to do that is understanding how these technologies can be used to solve real problems. Because when you're building something in a research lab, you're not always under sort of the same impetus to prove that you're actually solving an important problem that people care about. But when you are getting models out into production and commercializing that, in terms of selling a service or a product to users, you very quickly find out whether you're solving problems or not by whether people are willing to pay for your service or not. So it also involves a skill in terms of understanding how to identify problems and how to frame solutions to problems. And that's one of the things we also put a lot of focus on in my grad program here at Duke. And I find that this is not necessarily a natural skill for engineers. I mean, I when I was in undergrad, I was about as hardcore of an engineer as you could get. I had no interest in thinking about anything relating to business. And I think a lot of folks are like that. And then I got out into the working world and I realized that to be a successful entrepreneur, you also have to understand some things about how to build successful products and successful companies. And that is a kind of a skill set that you have to train, through experience. And I find that in a lot of my students, and we have about half of our students come from directly from undergrad versus going and working a couple of years first. And in particular, the folks that come right out of undergrad, they come in and one of the first things we do is we ask them to work on projects where they are open-ended, so they get to choose their topic, but they have to frame it in terms of go find a problem and then think about how you can build a solution to this problem that uses machine learning in some way. And I find that a lot of students tend to struggle with that assignment because they're used to a professor just handing them a problem and saying, "Go, here's the problem, here's the data, go solve this problem." And the idea of having to go find a problem for themselves to work on, it can be really intellectually challenging for them. And they come and they say, "How do I find a problem? I don't know where to look or how to identify whether something's a problem or not." And so then we go through a lot of work on that to kind of train them in terms of how to identify problems. Things like going out and actually talking to people and understanding the problem. Usually is the best way to do that. So it's an important skill, I think, and will become more and more important as the focus of the whole machine learning area really shifts from kind of building really powerful and performant models in a lab to actually using things in production.
Yeah, there's it's interesting because so I just got done taking the Google professional machine learning exam because I'm building a course on it, and they heavily put problem framing in the certification. And I agree with it, and I agree with the approach, which is that you have to be able to frame the problem correctly. Like one of the, I won't, I think I'm not even allowed to say what I won't be specific, but let's just say hypothetically, if you're going to frame a problem as you're someone asked you to solve, let's say, uh, um, a bus problem, right? Like where you have like a bus that takes people somewhere in the Bay Area, and it picks up people in the desirable places to live. Is that a machine learning problem? or is it a different kind of problem? And like, well, it's classic optimization problem, right? With it's the traveling salesman problem, right? So you don't need machine learning for that. It's a cool problem, but
Yeah,
it's not a machine learning problem. And
yeah.
so if you don't have the ability to differentiate between like a heuristic versus a machine learning problem, then that could really be a problem for your organization, because you're trying to solve heuristics that could easily be solved with 50 lines of code, and
Mhm.
trying to make it into an ML problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I teach an intro to machine learning class for our new grad students coming in. The first week, we spend time on how to determine whether a problem is best solved by machine learning versus by heuristics and business rules. Because I find that a lot of people actually struggle with understanding that, and the natural inclination is to think, oh, this is definitely something I should use machine learning for. And I actually really try to discourage that, to be honest, with my students. I try to instill in them the mindset that you should only really use machine learning when you find you can't solve it a different way, because there are still a lot of challenges involved when you're using machine learning. Trying to set up and maintain data pipelines as data is changing, you have drift and other things going on. Performance of models degrades over time when things are in production. There's bias issues. There's all sorts of problems with using machine learning, and so I try to encourage them always look at heuristics as the first place to consider when you have a problem that you're trying to solve, and try to solve your problem with heuristics. See how far you get, and if you're not satisfied with where you are, how well you're solving that problem, then start looking at machine learning. And a certain percentage of the time, heuristics is all you need, and you can just stop there, and you don't have to go any further. But then I also tell them, even if you do find that you need to resort to machine learning to solve your problem, at least at this point, you have a good baseline. So you know what performance you might reasonably expect with machine learning. Another challenge that I find students have is getting hung up on metrics. They see something like 98.5% accuracy, and they think this is amazing. But is that actually good or bad? I don't know. Metrics are always relative, right? So maybe one method you're getting 98.5, but another method you get 99.7. So maybe 98.5 actually is really not very good. But you don't know that until you have some baseline to compare against. So I always try to encourage them to create a baseline solution using heuristics. Pick your whatever metric you're going to use to evaluate the performance of that system. See how it performs on heuristics, and then move on to machine learning. And now you have something to compare against and see if you can make an
Yeah,
improvement or not.
it reminds me actually of the first time I built a recommendation engine, that the and these are things that people don't tell you, and there was like no information that I could find even about it at the time in the real world. Is like, here's a few different things that happen. So one is you have no data, right? So how could you possibly build a recommendation engine? You have no right answer. So you have to use a heuristic, and there's some good ones, right? There's the basically similarity, right? Like you can just take like a matrix of what things people, collaborative filtering, like what people liked or
Mhm.
who they're associated with, and then do basically do a decimal, or a like a fraction that basically says, like, like you're 90% as similar as this other
This
person.
person, and they
Yeah,
have
and like, what do they have that you don't have?
right. Yeah.
Oh, it's a heuristic, and it's pretty good.
Mhm.
And it's funny how I remember working with some people from a company one time, and they were like, "Well, this isn't machine learning. We can't do this." It's like, no, we can do this. We don't have actual ground truth data. We have no idea. This is that how you implement things, and that's a something that I think more people should be okay with, is like, look, especially the cold start problem. If you have no data, you can't be a purist and then say, oh well, we can't build a recommendation engine because like it's not ML, like and then that was one part of it. The other part, so then once you do build an ML recommendation engine, there's the other part that people don't talk about is the user experience. And so here's a perfect example. And I see this all the time since I built one from scratch. I see this sometimes as like, hey, you should connect to this person. And then you're like, actually, I don't want to. And then like, what do you do? Like there's they keep telling you to connect to someone. You're like, I
Yeah,
really
it's nice to
don't
get feedback.
want to connect to this person. And then all of the connections eventually will be like recommendations will be people you don't want to connect with.
Yeah.
And so now you have to build a different user experience that lets people blacklist things so that fresh recommendations come in. And so those are again, like a subtle little user experience thing that you don't really understand until you've actually built it from scratch. And then second, if you didn't start with a heuristic, you may not even like get to experience early and fix some of the real significant problems with ML.
Yeah, I find that user experience design of ML AI based products is a field that really probably doesn't get enough attention right now, and it's only going to be more important as more and more products start integrating machine learning. But and I'll give a little plug as well. I created a Coursera specialization last summer, and one of the courses is human factors and AI, and we talked a lot about these types of things. And I felt it was important to do because there wasn't a lot out there, at least at the time, on this subject. But there's a lot of unique aspects to consider when you think about the experience of a user with a product that's using ML. And what you just mentioned is a prime one. What if you don't like the recommendations that the ML system is giving you? The connections that are not your friend, you have no interest in. Products that it's recommending to you that you have no interest in buying. I give an example in my course of on is one of the leaders in recommendation systems, and they do some great things, and they use a variety of different types of technologies. But they occasionally one thing they have a hard time distinguishing between is when you buy something out of necessity versus out of desire, right? Because there's different motivations for buying something on Amazon. And this particular case, somebody had bought a new toilet seat on Amazon, and the lady then started getting emails, and when she went to the Amazon website, it was recommending her toilet seats, and it's not like she collects toilet seats or has a particular interest in buying more. It's just that she needed a new toilet seat. And this is a case where a lot of times we buy something out of necessity, and it's a one time
Yeah.
it's a one time thing. You don't want to buy more toilet seats, versus when we buy something out of desire, then maybe we're interested in buying some more. So this kind of integrating this feedback loop with recommendation systems, where as a user you can
Yeah.
provide feedback, is a really important thing.
And I think it's interesting recommendation engines as I've gotten more experience with them in the real world and also just been kind of studying them, there's another aspect which I think is an interesting one, which you're kind of starting to highlight is is it even useful? And I think that's a very interesting question because one of the data projects I did a while back for UC Davis's graduate school of business is I taught a like no code, low code, like kind of guest lecture. And I had never seen this data set before, but it was the Amazon product review data set. And we had basically 100 MBA students all break into teams, and it was like, okay, you have 2 hours, just do anything you can. And it was pretty cool actually because like all these different ideas were surfaced, and I just would never have discovered this on my own if the students hadn't figured this out. But what we discovered was that actually there was a lot of like brigading happening with the reviews where there'd be like 1,000 like 1-star reviews on like one day, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like, and like you're killing your competitor. Oh, okay. Right. And then it's like, well, what is that data feeding? Oh, it's feeding Amazon's recommendation engine. So then I mean, like when you get a review from Amazon, like are do they actually take account for that? It seems like they don't. I mean, maybe they fixed some of this since then, but like, and then recently, as well, I've read a lot of stuff about Glassdoor, and I think Glassdoor is another fascinating one. I used to actually live right next to them because I would drive from Marin County into the city all the time, and they have this really beautiful place run in Sausalito, and they if you look at the top tech companies, the Wall Street Journal did an article where there happens to be certain days where there's like 1,000 5-star reviews of the CEO.
I'm
it's
like,
like, huh, that's interesting. And then it's like, why is it that all of the top tech companies have such good CEO ratings? And then if you look at the flip side, if you look at a startup, I mean, if there's first of all, startups are just really difficult. But if there's 20 people at a startup, this is basically the unbalanced data set problem in addition to like data poisoning problem. Is you look in the startup and it's like the CEO's garbage. And, maybe they are, maybe they're bad, but like if you're a startup, you can't like tell 10,000 of your employees, by the way, we would strongly encourage on March 1st, 2023, that you give a 5-star review to the CEO strongly. And on March 2nd, we're going to have a margarita party, or so it almost makes me kind of think about like this concept of recommendation engine itself. So that's one negative. And then another one that's an interesting aspect of it is that obviously some of the stuff that we've seen about conspiracy theories and all the misinformation, and I don't know what the how to quantify the number of dollars that have been made from like basically things that harm people, and what was interesting is I actually had a discussion, and I won't name the company, I'll just generically, I had a discussion from the head of AI at one of the top companies in the world on LinkedIn, and he, with a straight face, I'm assuming when he responded to a critique I had, said it would be much worse if we didn't have our recommendation engine. And I have to say, I don't buy that. I don't buy that your recommendation engine, because again, I've built a recommendation engine, it would be better than just either a chronological feed, or the other one that would make no money is there is no feed, right? And so I think these are these kind of ethical, interesting things about the recommendation engines. There's so much stuff going on that people that are not in the industry are not aware of. Anyway, those are just some thoughts.
yeah, all good thoughts. There are definitely a lot of dangers with recommendation systems, and you named a few of them. One of the things that really concerns me is that so generally, I am a fan of recommendation systems. I think they can be very useful and powerful, but one of the big issues with them is that they tend to give us sort of blinders. It's like a horse. If you've seen race horses, and they have blinders on, so their field of vision is narrowed to a very specific area where the jockey wants them to look straight ahead, not be looking at the sides. And that's kind of what recommendation systems do for us when you think about it. I mean, they control what YouTube videos we watch, what music we listen to, what shows we watch, what movies we see, what products we buy, and what clothes we buy. I mean, and they do that by narrowing our field of vision in. They try to make an attempt to learn our preferences and then narrow our field of vision into those preferences. But that can go really wrong, right? I mean, the main, I mean, this has been brought up a lot of times with YouTube, but they're certainly not the only one. When you go on YouTube, you see some, they have the suggested videos. You see some video, maybe you accidentally click on it, maybe you intentionally clicked on it, but you just want to see what it was. And now all of a sudden you're getting, more and more videos of this thing, and maybe it's kind of a polarizing or an extreme thing, or maybe it's misinformation, and now you're just flooded with it, because now it's starting to think that you want more of this stuff, and it takes you kind of deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole, showing you more and more of the same thing, and all of a sudden your worldview has gone from this to like this, and that's really an issue. And I'm hoping, I don't know the details, but I'm hoping companies like YouTube are have found ways to improve this, or are working on them. But the
I
idea,
I think actually that they have not, and part of it is that I think the AI industry is is a little bit behind in terms of ethics, in that they talk a big game, but in practice, if you look at even fossil fuels, there's obviously some significant issues in the fossil fuel industry, but people are well aware of the negative externalities of, you light trash on fire to warm yourself, and then, everybody in your town gets, some kind of plastic toxin poisoning, right? Like that's the negative externality. But there's actually been, I think, not really a ton of insight into the negative externalities. And I think a few examples of this are this doom scrolling or reading the news kind of concept. Is, how many people maybe 10 years ago, even, or even five, let's say 10 years ago, would spend 6 hours a day reading, like, different news stories, and then how many do it now? Like, I remember when I was in the Bay Area walking around, and the entire city was like this, and they're just looking at a phone, and
yeah,
putting themselves into danger, actually. And so, this concept of addicting people to, outrageous content is very lucrative. I mean, it makes a lot of money, and
mhm,
many companies, their business model, that's their key metric, right, is engagement.
yep,
And so, I think the legislation has not caught up with it. The, consumer advocacy groups have not caught up with it. The leadership of companies have, basically, not done anything about it. So, what I'm curious about is, for the companies, they I know for a fact they're aware of the problem. Like, again, a head of AI at a big company said it, that they're aware of the problem. I don't agree with their solution, but what I'm curious about is if these companies are aware of that they may have an existential threat to their business. Because if, let's say, the European Union, which is probably one of the stronger hopes
mhm,
of fixing this, or maybe even China, they start to start cracking down and say, oh, by the way, you're addicting people and we're going to sue you. Oh, by the way, like, your recommendation engines are a negative externality and we'll fine you $100 million a day. Like, I wonder if any of these companies are basically going, when is that day going to come? Because then our entire business model is gone.
gone, right? Yeah, yeah, I mean, you have to think at some point that will happen, and you're right. I mean, the sort of addiction to social media, and the doom scrolling is um, is there, and it's just as dangerous as something like nicotine, right? That it addicts people, and it's not necessarily in their best interest to consume it, but they do, because it feels good in the moment, and it's addicting. And whereas things like alcohol and nicotine, society as a whole is, I think, done a pretty good job educating people as to the dangers of those things, so they can make informed choices for themselves. That's not the case with social media, right? There hasn't been enough awareness of the negative externalities of these things, and obviously a lot of the companies that provide these services, that they're incentivized by making money, which they do largely through advertising, and they maximize advertising by maximizing engagement, and maximize engagement by getting people addicted, so they keep coming back, right? And that's how they those are the metrics they track, is engagement metrics. And so as long as that happens, there's incentive to find ways to get people more and more engaged in their services. And that's, I think there's probably not enough awareness of the, as you said, the negative externalities of that and the impact that can have on people's lives, both on the part of the companies themselves, but also the individual people. I think for us as individuals, we probably really aren't aware, or don't, certainly not to the degree of, other similar types of products or services. We're just not aware of the negative consequences that can
Yeah,
have on our mental health, or our time, etc.
yeah. I mean, the one that comes to mind to me is like most of my life I've read, I would say at least a book a week, at least
Yeah.
many times 2, 3 books a week. And I noticed that like, why am I not reading more books? Oh, I'm reading like the news, right? Or I'm reading like stuff that's just garbage. And you just wonder about the effect that has on society of like people that are working on things that are stopping people from reading, like information, like actual information. Like, if again, if you put this up in the hypothetical and you said, in 1980 we're going to take 90% of the people that read books and we're going to replace that with like outrage stories from a news feed, that sounds like, Dr. Evil, like a Bond villain would do that.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I get the same issue. I wonder as well, why can't I seem to find more time to read? I've got a massive stack of books to get to, and that's a similar answer for me. When I look at how I spend my time, I realize I spend time reading news that I probably don't really, need to read, or I could condense the time, certainly. And I'm off of Facebook, Twitter, but I'm still on LinkedIn, and I spend some time on LinkedIn. Do I need to spend that time, every day, or not? So nobody's immune to it. I mean, I admit myself, I'm susceptible to spending time on those things, and then if I step back, I think, is that really the best way I should spend my time, or should I be using that time to read every day?
Yeah, I have a service called Next DNS. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's a pretty interesting service that I'll put it into the chat here. Is that what's interesting about it is you can create, like, I don't know what, it's $2 a month or something. You can create like a customized DNS service that actually like filters out all ads, period. Like they just get wiped off of the face of the internet. So that alone is worth the service. But
Yeah.
then you can explicitly block sites. And so what I do now is I have like a whole list of like news sites I just don't read, because I find like even the most high quality news, like even things like New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all this Bloomberg, that honestly I could condense it into a book. And so I've deleted. I can't see those sites on my computer, and I found the productivity boost is just off the charts. Like, I mean, from doing that.
Yeah, yeah, I'll take a look at that. That'd be great. I mean, even news articles. First of all, I don't want anybody to misinterpret our comments. It's important to stay up on what's going on in the world, but I find when I, sit down, I read news sites. Either I end up reading stuff I really probably didn't need to read, was more entertainment than, the news value, or I just spent 5 minutes reading an article where I could have spent 10 seconds looking at the headline in 2 sentences, and moved on. It's just too long. Yeah. Maybe it exists, but it'd be kind of neat to have a news service that was just like, maximum, 3 to 4 sentence articles at a time, or something to consume.
Yeah, or I mean, do you, this is also kind of an MLOps problem, is like, do you even need that? Like, instead of getting the news at the time interval of every hour, is it better to get it every month? Like,
Yeah.
and that's the case for things like the Atlantic or the New Yorker, or the Economist, or where it's like, honestly, is it better for you to just read a magazine, and get like a 20-page, article on some topic?
Right.
Probably. I mean, and no, is it? But it's bad for the company.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah, I found for me actually the best is I have a few different kind of daily newsletters. I wake up in the morning and in about 30 seconds I just scroll. They send a daily kind of summary, with just headlines or maybe a sentence or something, and those are great because I can spend about 2 minutes and I can get caught up on all the news and move on and not have to spend other time reading articles.
And the other MLOps thing that wanted to bring up was, because I'm working on this enterprise MLOps book
Yeah.
for O'Reilly. Is I went back to some of the business school things I had read in the past, and that concept of good to great, came up, which was a classic book about like studying what made companies go from good to great. And it was interesting to kind of tease out that the one of the criteria that the author had, I think Jim Collins said, was that the companies that they use technology as an accelerant were the ones that went good to great, not the ones that tried to make the technology become the focus of the company. And it just really got me thinking about MLOps, is like that. And this goes into some of the stuff we both do, is like that, if you think about machine learning, there's many ways to do it, right? You can train the model yourself. You can use a pre-trained model. You can do transfer learning, tweak a pre-trained model. You can use an API. And I think it's a mistake for students and academics especially to only focus on training the model, because that isn't actually adding business value. The reality is that it's the ROI that is what's important, not how you got to the technical solution.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. And there's kind of two sort of common trajectories you see with companies. One is kind of the start with the technology and then go find ways to apply it to to do things and make money. The other is start with a customer or user and the problem that he or she has, and then figure out a way to build a solution, and design the technology around that. And there are exceptions that are very successful with the first model, but the vast majority of successful companies are the second model. Is let's start with a user and a problem they have, and then let's go design their technology around that, and that may or may not use machine learning in it.
Yeah. Um, well, and what I think is very, very interesting is some of these companies that are merging in the pre-trained model space. Like Hugging Face, I think, is a very fascinating company in that if you had to throw a critique at it, it's like, oh yeah, but they're just hosting, the pre-trained models. It's like, well, you mean like GitHub? You mean like one of the most successful startups of all time? Like, well, yeah, that's true that they're just hosting models, but the just hosting models is now creating an ecosystem that lets people more rapidly apply technology solutions to ROI and try out an idea. So that's another thing I'm personally kind of betting for. Is I think the proliferation of pre-trained models, we're like 1% of what
Mhm.
it'll probably turn into.
Yeah, I'm also a big Hugging Face fan, and use them for a lot of different things. And you're right, their business model is somewhat different, but it works, and there's an important place for it, and a problem they're solving for people, across a wide variety of industries. And I also think pre-trained models are certainly the future. It's not. I don't know that anybody's in industry is training models from scratch to go into production. I think the vast majority are pre-trained, and will continue to be, because why reinvent the wheel and spend all that time and energy to do that initial training, when we can do it as a society. We can do it once, and a lot of people can benefit from it. So I really I think that's a great movement, that
Yeah,
accelerates a lot of
well,
companies.
and I think one of both of our former students is working for one of the pre-trained model companies, right? Like,
That's
'cause
right.
the concept makes a lot of sense, which is, a even if you it would be like me saying, hey, I'm gonna play professional basketball in the NBA. It's like, well, yeah, you can say that, but I'm not 7 foot tall and 300 pounds and 25. Like I can't, like my body won't do what my mind wants to do, right? So like same with the, if you don't have 20,000 GPU cluster with petabytes of data, there's certain models that you're just not going to be able to train. Either even if you want to train them, you can't. And then the second is the for people that are trying to be responsible in terms of not burning up energy that they don't need to. Why would you do something worse that you could just get for free? To your point.
Yeah, it's something that's not talked about nearly enough, but the environmental impact of training models, especially large scale models, can be huge. And I saw something the other day that within a couple of decades, they're forecasting that the sort of data and analytics field is going to consume up to 14 to 18% of total emissions in the U.S. And that's a huge number when you think about it. But it doesn't have to be like that. If we're smart about doing things once and not just doing the same thing over and over again with different people, there's no need to spend that time and money and then the power and resulting emissions impact that has as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I could even see things like how, especially in terms of social media. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future, because how many things are just the same topic or the same piece of data, like a viral video. And so if you have a file system that basically only lets one copy of the data exist, I mean, how much could you shrink, you know, like
Yeah.
everything, like there's all these things that are just basically they don't need to be replicated.
Right. Yeah, definitely great point. Storage is a prime example of that, and training models is the other one.
So
Yeah.
you had a kind of a MLOps type product, or AI ops type product that you developed. Did you want to demo it?
Yeah, I'd love to. A quick intro to what this is. So one of the things I've found that um, I talk to a lot of students who are spending a lot of time thinking about jobs and interviewing and where am I going to go with my career and what kind of role and so on. And I found that there's kind of two big problems that they tend to have. The first one is for the most part, it's unclear to them what the different job roles in industry are and how they differ from each other and what skills are required for each of them. So, in my particular case, since I teach machine learning, a lot of people are thinking about roles like software engineer versus a machine learning engineer versus a data scientist versus a data engineer. What do these different people do that makes them different, and what skills do I need for each of them, and which one's a better fit for me given the skill set I've built? What should I be focused on in terms of my career? For people that have worked in industry like you or I, it may seem very obvious. It's like how can you possibly not understand the difference between a data engineer and a machine learning engineer? But it's really not unless you've been in industry for a while and understand those different roles. So for people who in high school, college, graduate, starting work, it's not really not obvious at all what the differences are um, and what skills you need for each of them. So that is kind of the first challenge I've run into with my students. And we're fortunate that at Duke we have a great career center and we have career advisors who can work with the students. But most people are not so fortunate that they have easy access to a career advisor. And to be honest, a human career advisor cannot be an expert in every industry. Our career team serves engineering alone, which is great. But even within engineering, there are many different types of roles in different industries, and they're certainly not an expert in each one of those to be able to advise students of what here's the skills you need for this role versus this role. So that's kind of the first problem. And then the second one is once you sort of do your research and you figure out what type of a job you're going to shoot for, you most likely don't have all the skills you need to be qualified for that job. And so, you then go out and you build those skills. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. You can go to grad school and you can take, think about what classes to take that builds the skills you need to be prepared for that job. There's great options that are free or low cost on, Coursera, Udacity, etc. There's a lot of great books out there that are good for skill building. So there's a lot of different ways to build skills. And so the second challenge I find students run into is once they've sort of figured out what they want to be when they grow up and what type of role they want to do. And now, okay, I know I've got to build these skills. How should I do that? What classes should I take? What should I do online? We live in a world where we have an unbelievable amount of educational content out there on almost every topic you can imagine, which is tremendous and didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. And so it's not necessarily a problem of not having the content or access to the content. But the problem is it's overload. It's too much. I don't know, should I read this book or should I take this Coursera course or this Coursera course or this Udacity thing, or maybe I should take a Duke course or, so there's a lot of different ways to approach things. And so the second problem is this overload problem of not knowing how should I go about building these skills that I know I need to build for my role. So that's a little background. So I have been, for a while, I've been working on a tool that I call Compass, which has been really designed for my students initially, but I realized that the benefits can be for a lot of folks. I mean, it's certainly not limited to grad students at Duke by any means. In fact, probably others can benefit more than Duke students who actually have the ability to talk to you or I or talk to a career counselor. A lot of people don't have that option. And so I've been building this platform called Compass, which attempts to solve these two problems. One is providing a way for students or people thinking about a career change to understand different roles and the skills required for different roles, and then to find the best path for them to go and build those skills that they lack. And so it's kind of trying to solve both of these challenges. And I can I'll show you a quick demo of it here. Okay. And this actually, so it's in kind of an early beta at the moment, but it is live. And so you're welcome to go check it out and try it out on myskillscompass.com. It's free, so feel free to play around. And if you do, if you're listening to this and you do check it out, I certainly appreciate any ideas or feedback you have. But let's log in here. I'll show you kind of what it does. And this is a tool that uses wrong email address, machine learning behind the scenes, particularly a good amount of NLP. But it does a number of other things as well. So when I first log in here, the main thing I need to do, first of all, is create a skills map, which is kind of like a profile of my skills. And I can add hard skills, soft skills, credentials, et cetera. So you can see here on the screen, I've started working on this. And so I'm going to add a couple more here just to for fun to round this out. So let's say I've got some software skills. Let's just say add a little bit of JavaScript, and I'll select my current level. It's just I'm competent in JavaScript. I learned this on my own. And so we can build out our skills map, which is, if you're familiar with graphs, it's really a skills graph, actually. So it creates a big graph of you and all your skills and credentials that you have. So we'll add a couple more. So let's add some things here. Machine learning. Let's say I'm an expert there. I learned it on the job. So you can go in and you can add skills that you've developed either through your work experience, through study that you've done, through classes that you've taken, etc. let's add one more here. Deep learning, let's just say I'm an advanced beginner there, and I learned it. I took a great course at Duke called AIPI 520 that I happen to teach. Okay. All right, so now you can see we built out our map a little bit, and we've got a few skills on there, right? And I could continue. I could add some other things here, but that's good enough for the moment. So once you've built out your map, you can then start to explore potential career roles that might be a good fit for you given the skills that you have. So if I go over to here and explore careers, I can see that I've got a little recommendation system in here that has given the skills I have, has now recommended some careers that might be a potential fit for me. And looking at this list, I can see that I've done a pretty good job. And by the way, I'm focusing this on kind of data or analytics type careers, but it's actually built for a wide variety of different fields. So when I look at skills, I can add skills in business, healthcare, law, science, etc. And we'll take a look at that. But let's look at some of these careers that's recommended to me. So let's take a look at like data scientist. So I'll click on that one, and I'm going to display the skill set here. So now what this does is it shows me a kind of a typical skills map of a data scientist. And let me zoom in here a little bit, and I can see here's the a typical skill set for a data scientist. The larger circles indicate skills that are higher in demand for data scientists, more important skills versus the smaller skills. And then the colors show my current skill level. So I can see the red ones are ones that I don't have on my skills map today. The green ones are ones that I already am proficient or am expert in. And then the yellow ones are ones that I've started learning, but I'm not probably strong enough yet. So deep learning, for example, is yellow. Why is that? Because I'm an advanced beginner. To be qualified, I probably need to keep improving my skill set a little bit there. And then you can see it picks up some soft skills as well. And so I can look at this and I can kind of visually see how good of a fit I might be for a data scientist. Let's take a look at another one. Let's look at a machine learning engineer. So machine learning engineer, as you would expect, has some similar skills, but also some different skills, given it's a little bit of a different focus in terms of what they do. So some other things, some new things show up here. Hadoop, Spark, is showing up where I don't think that was on the data scientist one. AWS, Scala, a few new skills, and these are one question that comes up a lot is where does this come from? Is this somebody's opinion on what a machine learning engineer should know how to do? Actually, they're created from scanning millions of different job postings and job descriptions. And so I built an algorithm that processes millions of postings to extract the skills from them and identify for all the postings relating to a machine learning engineer, for example, here's the skill sets that they're asking for, across the millions of different postings. And then it gets refreshed over time because, skill sets do change over time for certain careers. So then if I see a skill that I'm not really sure what it is, let's say I've never heard of Hadoop before. I can click on it and I can get a little description of what it is here. And I can also see some relevant job roles that where this skill is important. So if I do know Hadoop, I can see some job roles that knowledge of Hadoop might benefit me in. Okay, and then I can also get a kind of a written view here of that as well. So if I look at machine learning engineer, for example, I've got a few skills that are relevant for this job already. And then I've got some suggested skills that I might want to build if I want to, make a career in a machine learning engineer type of a role. And then I can also, let me go back here. I can also, once I've figured out, kind of done some research, I can also browse other jobs, not just the recommended ones. So for fun, let's just look at I don't know, something in the sciences, a biologist, let's just say. I've clearly given my skill map, I'm not going to be a biologist type of role. But here's a typical skill set for a biologist based on job requirements and postings for a biologist. And as I can see, I've got a lot of red circles on there, so this is probably not a great fit for me, given my skill set. So let's go back to my recommendations. Let's take a look at data scientist. That was a much better fit for me. It looked like, let's say I've done some research, and this is what I want to do. I feel like data scientist is a good job role for me. I can then set it as my target role, and then the system will keep track of that. So now when I come back in here and I can go to explore careers, I've got my target role shows up. So I've got kind of this constant reminder of here's the map that I'm kind of shooting for in the skill set that I want to build out to be well qualified for getting a job as a data scientist. And so this allows students or others who are thinking about career changes to kind of explore skill sets for different roles, and then look at how your current skill set maps against the skills required for different roles, to identify areas where you may have some skills that are very relevant and applicable to that role, and you may have some areas here, SQL, for example, that according to my skill map, I haven't developed any competency in SQL yet. So this is probably something I want to go build some skills in if I want to be working as a data scientist. So what this is trying to do is solve that first problem I mentioned of understanding how job roles differ and how the skill sets for different job roles differ, and then identifying what skills are required for different roles. And then the second thing that it's at this point is kind of a work in progress is, once I've got a map of the skills for a target job role that I'm interested in, now what I want to be able to do is provide recommendations in this build skills section of how to go about building some of these skills. So for example, if you have registered in the platform that you're a grad student at Duke, I want to be able to provide you some suggested courses that you might want to think about going and taking that can build some of these skills. Or if you're not, there's some great options online. So we might recommend you some Coursera courses, for example, to take to build some of these skills. And then as you go through those, you further develop your skills, and you can go in and you can change your skill levels. And then, hopefully you get to the point someday where these circles are all green. And that's a great thing, because it means you're very well qualified for this type of a role. And one of the other, by the way, for folks listening to this, one of the other important things to note is, job postings and requirements tend to be a little bit of a wish list of everything they hope that a candidate has, but more often than not, not a lot of people meet every single request for skills that a job rec has. So don't think that you need to have every single skill on the list in order to be qualified. You don't. You should have a good portion of them, but you certainly don't have to have every single skill for to be qualified and be hired for a certain job role.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and like one of the things that I'm an advocate of is that companies should get rid of their hiring process, which is kind of a radical thing. But like, if, for example, with something like this, if you're able to prove that you have got all these skills, like through some, like you've taken the courses, and like in the case of Coursera, we know that actually they do have to validate much of their skills in a Coursera course. Then in some sense you could have, a passive hiring process, right? Like you put in all your job rec stuff and then it matches with something. It's like, oh, 80% match. And then you find someone who actually has, proven links that prove that these skills have been acquired. I mean, really, do you even need to know who the person's name is? Anything about them that identifies them at all? It could just
Right.
passively, you could just give that person a job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's where I hope that is at some point in the future, things will evolve. And, you could imagine this if you build out your skills map. One of the things that we're adding in is like you said, kind of a proof. So you say you're an expert. what's your what's your proof? How did you build those skills? Did you pass certain courses? Did you do certain projects in your work experience and previously? But if you can build a skills map and have each of those skills, your skill level verified in some way, whether it's through a certified course that you've taken, or you do a little assessment or something to verify your skill. If you could do that, a company, in theory, could go in and, like you said, build a skills map of the job, that job rec they have, and then just hit search and find candidates that skills map matches, the job that you're searching for, and then go and engage those candidates, right? And so you kind of move away from the resume, and there's a lot of documented issues with resumes and bias and other things. But you kind of move away from the resume towards a skills based approach to hiring, where you're hiring for the skills that somebody has, not what big name company was on their resume, or what school they went to, or if they even went to school at all.
Yeah, and it reminds me as well of I'll share real quick my screen here, that like a while back I came up with this concept of like a visual resume, where I don't actually need a job ever again, but the at the time I thought, I'm gonna just put like like a multi-dimensional view of the things I've done in my life,
Yeah.
and how they all kind of map together. And once you start looking at things from like a different perspective, it's like, oh well, actually, how do I even say this on a resume that like I was working on NFS file systems for like multiple decades. And that's highly related to big data, right? And and building things with Unix and Linux, have been working on that for decades. That's also highly related with other things. And even TV and film, the has a was actually data engineering, but like yours is much, I think, better, and it's like kind of fine grained approach. But yeah, just yet another example of like how um, I think we're ripe for different kinds of resumes and potentially passive hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a cool way to sort of present yourself. I like that. I think there's a lot of issues with the paper resume, and I think that its days are probably, hopefully, are numbered, and we'll move away and find better ways for candidates to match with jobs that eliminate some of the bias issues and access issues that we have today, with our current system. And yeah, I like that. I like that visual, and that's what I hope we'll get to eventually with this, is that I know LinkedIn, I think, is working on some similar stuff, and some others, but moving towards a skills based approach to matching with job roles, and then presenting yourself as a candidate for different roles, and for on the employer side to hire for skills, and not for names, or credentials, that somebody has.
Yeah, and I mean, like there's many cases of recent history, actually, of actually elite companies, universities, where then in practice they're actually not delivering, right? Like I mean, and so just the name itself is not a great signal, there has to be more to it. And I think the approach you're pointing out, I think, is almost in a sense like a direct antidote to that.
Yeah. Yeah, you think about, look, I mean, we both teach with Duke, and Duke is a great school, and there's certainly a lot of value, in coming to a place like Duke. But we also recognize that not everybody can, different reasons, location, price, access, et cetera. And so it's been fantastic to see the rise of alternative paths to build skills. You don't have to come to Duke, or go to a big name school. There are other options that might make sense for you. There are pros and cons of every path that you choose. One is
Well,
not better.
and what I like about Duke is that the stuff that you and I both do, which is that we're able to build courses that are very similar in the material, that are actually be able that are delivered worldwide. And so I
Yeah,
think that's one thing that I think that some universities can do, that we're doing, which is that, there's obviously a different experience. Just like, if I buy a Mercedes, they're awesome, right? But they're also $100,000, right? but
right.
but but at the same time, there's other mechanisms of transportation that are really good too. But and so similar, like with a Coursera course, if it's the same material, right, but it's in a slightly different format, then everybody in the whole world can get access to it, and then that actually does link directly into the style of thing you're building.
Yeah, it's been a great, great movement towards increasing access towards, education. Places like Duke and peer universities, have some of the best teachers and best courses in the world, and it's great to see that there are options now to open those up to a lot of other folks as well to consume in different ways. We've both done stuff on Coursera, which is a great medium for us to be able to bring, the courses and that we build to a lot more people, beyond just the folks that, a small subset of folks that can come to Duke, and open source courses, open source textbooks, et cetera. That all of that has been, I think, been a great benefit to society, because ultimately a university is really a service to society. I mean, its mandate is to educate, and not, in my mind anyway. Educating society doesn't necessarily mean only educating the 40 people that sit in your classroom, but it means finding other ways to educate a much larger percentage of the population. And so I'm really, Duke's been I think one of the early adopters of teaching online, and working with Coursera, and other universities. Stanford's done a good job there as well. Some others, MIT, but it's great to see these universities finding ways to leverage technology to be able to bring the great things they can offer the world out to a much larger population.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. Like there's I haven't read the book yet, and I'm planning to. It's called Effective Altruism. That, the concept of trying to do as much good as possible, as quickly as possible, and, ultimately, if for like a university, that should be the goal, right? Is how do you actually make as much help to the world as possible by, like you said, providing a service. And, there's many ways to do it, including, building content from Coursera or similar type platforms. And that actually has been one of the things I've really enjoyed about Duke. Is I mean, honestly, I would say, like, if I had if I didn't like Duke, because I'm very honest about things, but I've been extremely impressed with just that style is such a big deal, in the university. And that there's, knowing that, there's 20,000 people that I've helped, that are getting jobs in cloud computing or MLOps or whatever, that feels like, I'm doing something that's helpful, and that's the kind of feedback loop that I think the world needs, is you get positive feedback from helping people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I, like you, I am really impressed with what folks across Duke are doing, and the focus they put on it. And it's not, it's not Duke is, like others, is not without its challenges. And one of the big challenges there is just the way that most professors who are on sort of the tenure track are incentivized. And when you look at what it takes to get to tenure, it's research, teaching, and service, but the service is really thought of in terms of service to a university, not service to society as a whole. And I really think it should be, right, because service to university doesn't necessarily mean go figure out ways to teach the world, but service to society does, right? And so I think you should get credit, towards tenure and promotions and so on for engaging, with teaching online, doing Coursera courses, writing books, et cetera, to share knowledge and disseminate that to the world, not only to Duke students. So that's one, example of something that a construct that exists in higher education today that I think needs to evolve. But I've been really happy. The community at Duke is very supportive and focused on finding alternative paths to get our education out.
Great. So how I know this recording is not only going to be it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, those kinds of things, but it's also going to go up on O'Reilly, and so there's millions of people. I don't know if the millions will read it, but there's millions of users on the platform, and then also we'll link it into a book I'm writing on enterprise MLOps, and so I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will want to contact you. What are some ways that people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn is probably the best bet to reach out to me. Like I said, I'm not active on Twitter or other platforms, but I am somewhat active on LinkedIn. Just search for John Reifschneider. You can find me at Duke too. For people that have questions about what we do at Duke, have interest in the graduate program, whatever, feel free to email me. I think my email is probably up on the program website, but my name at duke.edu, and feel free to reach out if you do want to talk about graduate school.
Great, and it's and I bet probably some people would be interested in, like, how hard is it to get in, and how can I apply, and all that, and they can I'm assuming contact you about that as well.
Yeah, feel free. We try to put a lot of info on the program website. So if you just search for like MNJI at Duke or Masters AI at Duke or something, you'll find our site, and we got a lot of information about the program there and the classes and what makes it unique and how to apply and all that stuff. We are a program that welcomes people from a very diverse range of backgrounds. We have engineers from all branches of engineering. We have scientists. We have folks that work in healthcare, and so sometimes people feel like they have to, if I want a master's in machine learning, I've got to study computer science, or if I didn't study computer science, I probably can't get in anywhere. That's not the case, at least not with us anyway. I can't speak for other programs, but we do welcome folks from a variety of backgrounds, again, because we're really firm believers in the power of that combination of domain expertise in a certain field and skills in these technologies of AI and machine learning. So feel free to check out the information on our website. You can certainly reach out if you have any specific questions.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we had a great conversation, and
Yeah.
it'll help a lot of people, and I'm sure we'll maybe have a conversation again in the future.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for hosting me on here, Noah. Really enjoyed our conversation today, and for all the folks listening in, thanks for listening.